Mr. Small was out for a walk. Can you see the pictures? Mr. Small. Oh, sorry. This is called Mr. Small, A Big Day Out. And we start by being very quiet.
Why?
Well, because I'm reading a story. Mr. Small was about to go for a walk. He was feeling more than a little bit sorry for himself. It wasn't much fun being as small as Mr. Small, you see. Very small, too small. Sometimes, I suppose, things can get him down, being that small. He wouldn't be able to get the sweets from the cupboard, would he?
No.
He sat down under a tree and closed his eyes. Oh, I do wish I was bigger, he sighed. Much, much bigger, he added. Now, Mr. Small didn't know that there was a wizard lying down on the other side of the tree. He had stopped for a snooze, and just as he had been dozing off, the wizard had overheard Mr. Small's wish. The wizard smiled to himself. Without even opening his eyes, he muttered some magic words under his breath that sounded a little bit like this. Izzy wizzy, let's get busy, make Mr. Small tall. And with that, some strange lights started flickering in the sky like little stars floating around. And then he went back to sleep. He just went back to sleep. As Mr. Small lay there, something really quite strange and remarkable happened. Something really quite remarkably magic, in fact. Mr. Small began to grow. And grow. And he carried on growing until he bumped his head on a branch. When he crawled out from underneath the tree and stood up, he was taller than the tree. Much taller. Gosh, said Mr. Tall. He could not believe his eyes. He couldn't believe his size.
No, you mean Mr. Nosy.
No, Mr. Tall. Mr. Small, I mean. He went for a walk to try out his new size. It was wonderful. He loved it. He could see over the top of everything, over the tops of trees and cars and houses. It was fantastic. He was stronger than Mr. Strong because he was so big. Noisier than Mr. Noisy.
I'm larger than you.
And he was taller than Mr. Tall.
Stamp.
He could even make his fingers meet when he put his arms around Mr. Greedy's belly. Oh, must be huge then, mustn't he? Mr. Small had a marvellous day, and as the sun set, he lay down in a field and went to sleep. As Mr. Small slept, he shrunk back to his normal size, but he didn't know this because he was sleeping. You see, the wizard had cast a spell that would only last one day. And when Mr. Small woke up, it was dark. Oh,
And his hat was big.
what a wonderful dream I had, he said to himself, and got up and started to walk home. But he found he couldn't, because he was surrounded by a wall, and it was in the middle of the dark. He thought this was really strange.
Ow.
But when he felt along the bottom, he discovered that he could lift the wall up. That's weird, isn't it? He thought. And it was light outside. When he crawled out from underneath this wall, Mr. Small couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe what he'd seen. He'd been trapped underneath a gigantic hat. A hat that looked just like his own hat, but was huge. Well, I never, said Mr. Small.
That's his hat.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't a dream after all. That sleepy old wizard had forgotten to finish off his spell properly. Or had he? He had forgotten to make sure that Mr. Small's hat would shrink back to the right size. Mr. Small now had a 10-gallon hat.
10-gallon hat.
Yeah. I bet he could turn it into a boat or something, couldn't he? Or a house if he cut a window in the side. A 10-gallon hat for a pint-sized person. And that was it. Mr. Smalls. Big day out.
Daddy, can you do nothing now? Like, it goes downstairs and like Alice and Peabody goes down like Alice.
You want to play hide and seek?
Like Alice and
It's too late for that.
Like Alice. Like Alice and
No, tomorrow morning we get dressed ready for school.